Okay, so even Canada, land of being polite and maple syrup, they're not immune to this whole global trend of kind of shaking things up politically, are they? It's crazy. Justin Trudeau stepping down after almost 10 years in office. Like, that's got to have a pretty interesting story behind it, do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a big change. And you're spot on. It's definitely not just a Canada thing.
Yeah.
2024, we saw governments that have been around for a long time losing their hold on things in the UK. Even like potential upsets happening in the US. Seems like everyone's ready for something different.
Exactly. So today we're going to dive deep into all the reasons that might have led to Trudeau deciding to step down. We're going to be looking at a Reddit thread. It's on Rye News and some news reports from Reuters, NDTV. And we found another interesting article on Reuters.com too. Basically, we're going to help you connect all the dots and figure out what happened without, you know, getting lost in a mountain of information.
For sure. I think looking at these different sources will give us like a well-rounded picture of how this all unfolded.
So Trudeau's been leading Canada for almost a decade, which is a pretty long time, especially
Wow.
considering, well, one Redditor pointed this out. Canadians have a history of voting out governments rather than voting them in, so that's interesting. It really makes you think, though, what was that final straw, that made this the breaking point?
Hmm. Well, one thing that keeps coming up in all the sources we've been looking at is this feeling of like economic anxiety. Inflation's been a global issue, and Canada definitely hasn't been immune to it. The cost of living's been skyrocketing, and wages just haven't been able to keep up?
Yeah, and it's not just a feeling. The numbers definitely show it, too. One person on Reddit mentioned that in Toronto, the average house price is almost $1.1 million,
Uh,
but the average household income after taxes is only about $101,000 a year. It's a crazy gap.
Yeah, that really puts things into perspective. Housing affordability is a massive issue all over Canada. And Trudeau's government has been getting a lot of flack for, how they've been handling it or maybe not handling it. Some people are saying that the money they've been spending, like their deficit spending, hasn't really gotten to the root of these economic problems.
Which brings us to another thing that people are really frustrated about, and that's the housing crisis. Prices are just out of control, and it feels like owning a home is just a pipe dream for so many Canadians. Trudeau saying that housing isn't his responsibility, even though technically he's right, well, let's just say it hasn't exactly been well received.
True, because while housing is generally a provincial matter, the federal government could still be doing a lot more. Things like coming up with national strategies for housing, offering incentives for developers to build more affordable places, and tackling things like speculation that are driving up prices. So even though, yeah, he's right in a constitutional way, it just came across like he was trying to dodge responsibility for a really big problem.
Right. It makes you wonder, was the backlash really about what he said or more about just how it looked? And speaking of blame, a lot of the people on Reddit are pointing fingers at foreign buyers, specifically investors from China, saying they're the reason prices are so high. It seems like we hear that a lot in different countries that are struggling with housing. What do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, yeah, it's a factor. There's no doubt about that. But just blaming foreign buyers is really oversimplifying the problem. There are lots of things at play here, like policies here in Canada, zoning rules, even people in Canada speculating on properties. Focusing only on foreign buyers kind of misses the bigger picture. We need a way more comprehensive approach to deal with an issue this complex.
So it's not as simple as just like shutting the door on foreign investment.
Nope, not at all.
Huh,
Got to look at the whole picture.
that makes sense. Okay, so something else that comes up a lot on Reddit is immigration. Canada's seen a pretty big increase in immigration, especially with Trudeau in charge, and there are definitely some mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, immigration's always a tough subject. It seems like there's
Yes,
always
right.
someone who's concerned about how it affects housing, jobs, and our resources, especially with the housing crisis we've already got going on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some of the comments on Reddit definitely reflect that. People are talking about overcrowded infrastructure, more competition for resources. It can be a lot.
Absolutely. But then you have the people who are saying that more immigration is actually a good thing. Like it's necessary to deal with all these worker shortages we have, especially in certain industries. Then there's the whole debate about a lack of clear pathways to permanent residency for the people who are coming in.
And speaking of that, there's this one really powerful story a Redditor shared about how Indian immigrants have been playing a huge role in the trucking industry. They brought up the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. That was a terrible tragedy. And their point was that sometimes drivers who aren't familiar with our roads and rules here in Canada, maybe they haven't gotten enough training and support, and that could have been a factor in that accident.
Yeah, that's a powerful example of how these Big, complicated issues can have really devastating consequences. It makes you stop and think, we need policies that strike a balance between what our economy needs and making sure everyone's safe and well taken care of.
Absolutely. It's easy to get lost in all the numbers and debates, but at the end of the day, real people's lives are being affected by these
You
decisions.
got it. This isn't just theoretical, it's impacting real people, real communities.
Okay, before we move on, there's another layer to this whole immigration thing. One Redditor made a pretty startling claim that something like 5 million immigrants might leave Canada in 2025 because their visas are running out. The implication was that the Trudeau government basically brought them in, a lot of them from India, as a quick fix for our worker shortage, but without any real plan for them to stay permanently.
That is a huge claim, and if it's true, the impact on Canada could be massive, both for our economy and our society.
If even half of that is true, that's a massive amount of people who've been working and contributing, suddenly having to pack up and leave.
Hmm.
I can't even imagine what kind of ripple effect that would have across all kinds of sectors. Healthcare, transportation, technology, construction. Everything would be affected.
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on, and it goes back to that criticism we were talking about, that our immigration policies lack a long-term vision.
Right. Like a ticking time bomb.
Exactly. This situation really highlights how important it is to think about the long-term consequences of our policies and make sure they're sustainable, Sustainable for Canada and for the people who decide to make Canada their home.
Okay, well, this is getting a bit heavy. Maybe we should lighten things up a bit. How about we talk about taxes?
Taxes, everyone's favorite topic, right? I bet you're talking about the carbon tax.
Of course, the carbon tax. Even with the rebates that most Canadians get, it's still a pretty controversial topic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who see it as just another burden, and they blame it for everything, like, why gas prices are going up.
Yeah, and the Conservative Party, they haven't been shy about using that anger to their advantage. They've been painting it as a classic example of government overreach, like the government sticking their nose where it doesn't belong. And they say it's just taking more money out of people's pockets, even though it's supposed to be about fighting climate change and encouraging sustainability.
It's wild how a policy that's designed to help most Canadians ends up becoming such a hot-button issue. It makes you wonder how much of the pushback is about the policy itself and how much is just about how it's being spun.
It's a great point. It really shows how powerful it is to frame things in a certain way. These complex policies get oversimplified and turned into weapons for political gain, and that often means sacrificing nuance and real understanding.
Yeah, it's a good reminder for all of us. We need to look past the headlines and really dig into the details before we go forming strong opinions about these complicated topics.
Absolutely. Critical thinking and a healthy dose of skepticism are essential, especially these days when everyone's got an opinion and it's so easy to spread misinformation.
Okay, so we've talked about some pretty big issues, the economy, housing, immigration, even taxes. Maybe it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about the political landscape. From what we're seeing, it looks like the Conservative Party is in a pretty good position to win the next election.
Yeah, the polls definitely seem to be pointing in that direction. It feels like Canadians are ready for a change, and the Conservatives have been pretty good at tapping into that feeling.
And now Trudeau stepping down.
Mhm.
Some people are saying it's a strategic move.
Mm.
One person on Reddit even called it damage control, like he's trying to minimize how badly the Liberals might lose and avoid getting completely wiped out.
Yeah, that kind of thing happens a lot in politics. When a leader isn't popular anymore, sometimes a change at the top can help the party distance themselves from that and kind of give them a chance to regroup and refresh their image before the next election.
But is a new leader really going to be enough to change things? The Liberals are up against some pretty big challenges right now. What do you think their chances are?
Honestly, it's going to be tough for them. It's definitely an uphill battle. They need to find someone who can really connect with voters, someone who can address the things that people are worried about and offer a real alternative to what the Conservatives are proposing. It's not impossible, but they're going to need a big change in strategy and a really strong, unifying leader to pull it off.
So let's talk about what might happen after Trudeau's resignation. There's already a lot of talk about who might take his place. Are there any names that you think are particularly interesting?
Well, it's still early, but one name that keeps coming up is Chrystia Freeland. She's the finance minister right now, and a lot of people see her as a potential frontrunner. She's been in politics for a while, and she's got a strong background in economics, which could be really important given all the economic anxiety that's out there. But, She'll need to show that she can connect with people on a personal level, too, and make them believe that the Liberals can actually handle the challenges that are coming.
And beyond just the leadership question, I think a lot of people are wondering what this potential change in government means for actual policies. With the Conservatives looking like they might win, there are some concerns about what might happen to things like healthcare and social programs.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of talk about whether a conservative government would shift things in a more fiscally conservative direction. That could mean cuts to spending, maybe even some privatization in certain areas, and potentially moving away from some of the social programs that the Liberals have put in place.
Yeah, especially those popular programs like the $10 a day child care and the new dental care plan. Those have made a big difference for a lot of Canadians. Do you think they would survive under a conservative government?
That's a really good question. To be honest, it's hard to say for sure. The Conservatives haven't been as vocal about supporting those specific programs, and their platform seems to be focused more on being fiscally responsible, maybe even shrinking the size of the government.
So basically a leaner, more budget-conscious approach.
Yeah, exactly. Their argument might be that these programs are just too expensive, or that there are more efficient ways to do things, maybe by involving the private sector more.
That would be a pretty big change for Canada's social safety net.
For sure. And it's definitely going to be something that's debated a lot during the election campaign. It'll be interesting to see how each party positions themselves on this and what concrete plans they offer to address people's concerns.
Well, this whole situation has definitely gotten people talking. It's a good reminder that politics isn't just about abstract ideas, you know? It has real consequences that affect people's everyday lives.
Absolutely. And it shows how important it is for people to stay informed, have thoughtful conversations about these issues, and use their right to vote to help shape the future they want for themselves and their communities.
It's like that whole think globally, act locally idea, right? We can learn a lot from what's happening in other countries and use those lessons to make a difference in our own communities.
Totally. It's about realizing that we all share these challenges and opportunities and finding ways to create positive change no matter where we are.
That's one of the things I really like about these deep dives, you know?
Yeah.
We're not just sitting back and taking in information. We're actively thinking about it, making connections, and hopefully becoming more informed and engaged citizens.
Exactly. It's all about giving people the tools to understand the world around them, all its complexities, and to get involved in shaping a better future.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Why Trudeau resigned, what might happen in Canadian politics next, and even some of the big global trends that are playing into all of this. But it doesn't end here.
Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a better understanding of what's going on in Canada and what might happen in the future, but it also reflects the challenges and opportunities that so many other countries are facing around the world.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected, and the choices that leaders make in one country can have a ripple effect on everyone else.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed, have those tough conversations, and get involved in shaping the future you want to see. Your voice matters.
Couldn't said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Justin Trudeau's resignation and what's happening in Canadian politics. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little bit thought-provoking.
And we hope it sparked your curiosity to keep exploring these topics, not just in your own country, but all around the world.
Because, as we've seen today, what happens even in a place that seems far away can have a big impact on our lives.
The world's interconnected, Staying informed is more important now than ever. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.